I've seen the same thing happen over and over. Someone grabs the cheapest gaming laptop they can find, only to end up wrestling with a screen that can't keep up, a keyboard that feels more like a typewriter, and a battery that dies before the first level is even finished. That regret is real, and it's why I paused before I even thought about the ASUS ROG Flow Z13. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The question I kept asking myself was simple: does this 13-inch convertible actually give you a smarter buy, or is it just a pricey slab that looks cool on paper? First, let's talk about who this machine is built for. If you're a gamer who also needs a serious productivity device, think graphic design, video editing, or running multiple VMs on the go, the Flow's 2-in-1 form factor makes a lot of sense. You can flip the screen into tablet mode for sketching or presentations, then snap it back into a classic laptop stance when you need that tactile keyboard for long raids. On the other hand, if your gaming sessions are usually confined to a desk, you probably won't miss the detachable keyboard, and you might be better off with a traditional 15-inch beast that can house a bigger GPU and a larger cooling solution. Heat is the first elephant in the room for any thin gaming notebook, and the Flow is no exception. The chassis is impressively compact, but squeezing a high-end AMD Ryzen processor and a powerful GPU into a 13-inch shell means the fans have to work overtime. In real-world testing, the fans spin up noticeably when you push past 30 FPS in demanding titles like Cyberpunk 2077. The sound is a low hum at idle, but under load it becomes a steady whine that you'll definitely hear if you're trying to stream or talk to teammates. It's not a scream, but it's also not something you can ignore in a quiet CAF. If you plan to game for hours on a couch, you'll need to be comfortable with that acoustic backdrop. Speaking of the fans, the cooling system does a decent job of keeping temperatures in check for short bursts. You'll see the CPU hover around the mid-80s Celsius during intense moments, which is safe for the silicon but not exactly a cool summer day. The downside is that sustained performance will taper off a bit after 20 minutes of continuous play as the system throttles to protect itself. For most indie titles or esports games that don't demand a lot of raw horsepower, you won't notice this dip. But for AAA releases that push the GPU hard, expect a slight dip in frame rates once the thermal ceiling is reached. Keyboard feel is another practical angle that often gets glossed over in marketing videos. The Flow uses a fairly shallow travel key, typical of many modern thin laptops, but the keys are well spaced and have a decent actuation point. The RGB lighting is subtle and won't blind you at night, which is a nice touch for a machine that markets itself as a portable powerhouse. The biggest gripe I've heard from users is the lack of a dedicated macro row that you find on larger ROG models. If you rely on custom keybinds for MMOs, you'll have to get creative with software layers or external peripherals. Battery life is where the Flow tries to differentiate itself from the usual gaming crowd. ASUS claims up to 10 hours of mixed usage, and in practice you'll get around 6 to 7 hours if you stick to web browsing, office work, and a few low-intensity games. The moment you crank the graphics up, that number shrinks dramatically. You'll be looking at the charger after an hour of playing at medium settings. That's not a flaw, it's a trade-off baked into the design. A high refresh 2.5K touchscreen draws a lot of power, and the smaller battery simply can't keep up with a full-blast gaming session. If you need a machine that lasts all day on a single charge while you game, you'll have to temper expectations or keep the power brick handy. Now, let's talk about the display because that's where the Flow really shines. A 13.4-inch panel with a 2.5K resolution, 180Hz refresh rate, and a 3 milliseconds response time is something you rarely see outside of dedicated gaming rigs. The colors are vibrant, and the brightness is enough to fight most indoor lighting. The touch capability feels responsive enough for drawing or navigating menus, but you'll notice a slight lag if you try to play fast-paced shooters in tablet mode. The system isn't optimized for that use case. Still, for anyone who wants a crisp, fluid visual experience without lugging a separate monitor, it's a compelling argument. Portability is where the Flow earns its Flow name. At just over 2 kilograms, it slips into a typical backpack without tipping the balance. The detachable keyboard adds a layer of flexibility. You can set it up on a coffee table, on your lap, or even on a small desk while the screen acts.